I've been asked to talk about two topics. One is our own work at LBL, and the other is issues of energy and climate change in China. I must say we have worked collaboratively not only with folks in China, but with the Alliance and with NRDC over many years, and it's always been a pleasure. Well, it hasn't always been a pleasure to work on certain issues in China, but almost always with China. Our goals are to promote energy efficiency in China, much as you've heard the Alliance, to help build institutions and to understand the dynamics of energy supply and demand in China. We've been working collaboratively for more than 2 decades. The group has 8 core members, 2 postdocs, 4 long-term visiting researchers. The visiting researchers will tend to grow over time, but altogether we're 14 people. What do we do? Well, our activities are data acquisition and analysis. We produce periodically a huge compendium of energy data on China and make that available on a desk to anyone who wants to have it. We provide technical assistance to China as requested. Our major effort is research relating to policy analysis and policies to promote energy efficiency, and we have been deeply involved at various times in institution and capacity building. Our areas of work, it happens, are similar to those of the Alliance. We work in buildings, work in industry, and the cross-cutting areas include scenario development, where we're spending a great deal of time trying to understand future energy scenarios under different assumptions and conditions in China, and specific policy analyses. We too are extremely interested in the energy and CO2 savings that our actions have promoted, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Our contributions, as I've said, have been in buildings, industry, and cross-cutting. Let me skip that. On appliance standards, we effectively brought modern appliance standards to China in the early 90s. We recognized a need for appliance standards in China, and most importantly, recognized an interest on the part of the Chinese policy community to doing appliance standards. Quick note, it was really my biggest introduction to working with the Chinese, in that I promised them I would give them intensive training if they promised me they would come out with standards. And they promised that they would produce standards 18 months after we initiated training. Another aside, I had no funding to do the training, but once they made their promise, we were able somehow to come through with that training. It's the way many things really start. And over time, the standards in place are saving today 60 billion kilowatt hours a year, and by 2020 it'll be almost twice that, and there are a whole lot more standards in place and updates to standards and strengthening of various standards. They're already on their 3rd round on refrigerators, so that these numbers will grow substantially over time. The second major achievement I think that we've had over these 20 years has been promoting industrial energy efficiency policy in China, and this is the work of my good colleague Lynn Price. She had this idea back in the early 2000s to promote a voluntary agreement between the government and 2 steel plants to achieve energy efficiency goals in a 3-year period. This was done in Shandong province and was enormously successful, in spite of the fact that there were great skeptics on all sides for many years before we eventually got agreement to do this project. This project and the agreement that it produced led to the major industrial energy efficiency policy that China now has on the books that applies to the top 1,000 enterprises in China. So we consider this to be a second achievement that we've made, and a third achievement isn't here, okay? I'll just say that it involves, Barbara mentioned the creation of the Beijing Energy Efficiency Center, and that was done in collaboration with a colleague from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory up here in the Northwest, Bill Chandler. A second institution that we were very involved in creating is the China Sustainable Energy Program, or the Energy Foundation, which has grown to be the premier example of how a developed country can support a developing country, or can support China in promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy. That program has been so successful that when the Packard Foundation, the initial sponsor of the program, had to cut its programs across the board an average of 70% because of disaster in the stock market, that was the only program that they didn't touch. And it's subsequently grown. I think that shows great foresight on the part of lots of folks, the importance of the problem. Okay, now let's talk about issues in China. And I see my problem. Here we go. Okay. It turns off. That's not fair. Or maybe it's very fair. Okay. This may be the most important view graph I have to show. If you don't remember anything else from this presentation, I urge you to remember this one. So I'm going to spend a little more time on it. You can see the top line from 1980 to 2000 is the growth of the gross domestic product in China, and on the bottom is energy. Now, it happens that the conventional wisdom is that for a developing country, energy grows faster than GDP. And when I first went to China in the mid-'80s, and I was told that, in fact, energy was growing slower than GDP, I was loath to believe it, because everything I had learned was as a country industrializes, it needs more and more energy. And the opposite seemed to be the case. And I don't think anybody knew that outside of China, because at that point, information from China in energy really wasn't made available outside of China. So I undertook the job of tracing down the numbers, trying to find out what it was all about, seeing if they could be documented. I do believe the energy numbers, the GDP numbers. I'm not knowledgeable enough to really fix them, but I don't think they're too terribly far off. What this says, and the main thing I learned was that this was policy. This was not happenstance. Deng Xiaoping announced